Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your weekly look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer.
This episode is brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd merch store. Use the coupon code podcast and you'll get 20% off of your next purchase at store.untappd.com. You could use that 20% off to buy an extra hat or donate it to Harrison, and he'll get another Hawaiian shirt, and we can keep this Hawaiian Miami trend going on YouTube for as long as possible. But whatever you do, make sure you've liked or subscribed to this podcast if you enjoy listening to it or you value me and Harrison at all. If you're listening to it on YouTube, hell yes. Give us a thumbs up if you think it's a good show, or leave a comment. Really, those are cool. Go on to iTunes or your favorite podcatcher and leave a review and tell us, does Harrison need more Hawaiian shirts, or should he actually try wearing a hat for once? Who knows? You let us know. But thanks for listening.
Yes. And thank you to whoever made this Hawaiian shirt. It's 99% polyester, I think, or some kind of stretchy material. If I jumped out of a plane, I could probably fly and float safely to the ground, which is how one should enter Miami Beach. But we're not talking about Miami today and cool entrances. No, today, we figured it was time, after bathing in the haze craze and getting lost in the Imperial Coffee Stout sauce, to return to the classics. To be reminded that while the insanely creative beer is being made today have the abilities to dazzle you with waves of flavor the same way a Dali or a Monet dazzles with layers of color and emotion, the single greatest work of art of all time might be Giotto's hand-drawn, nearly perfect circle. One brush, one swift movement, and history was made! If a hand-drawn perfect circle were to be a beer, it would probably be a Kölsch. And so it's a style John and I both love, and so we grabbed one that we never had before from, of course, Cologne, Germany, the birthplace of all things Kölsch, and we're going to enjoy that today. So put on your dancing shoes, grab a German beer, stop Googling who Giotto is, and join us in unlocking the Das Boot badge.
And also Harrison, who's made me painfully aware of his art background. Happy June. Happy Pride Month, man.
Yes, John. Lots to be dancing about today. Happy Pride Month to you as well.
Yeah, word on the street, I kind of heard in some back channels that Untappd and Hop Culture and Beer Advocate have some pretty cool things planned for this month.
You bet. Yeah. So it all starts this weekend with the Queer Beer Fest presented by Hop Culture and Sam Adams. We've been talking about it for a while. I talked about it on Hop Takes. Obviously, if you're following Hop Culture and Untappd, and we're talking about it on those channels too. Tickets are sold out. So hopefully you grabbed a box from halftime and you've got your beer nice and cold ready for this weekend. You can enjoy these awesome conversations and beer this Saturday. If you didn't get a box, though, don't worry, the live stream is actually free for this event. Nice. So you can just grab, whatever beer you want and join in on the conversation there, get in the chat, ask some questions, have some fun. And I got a little insider scoop for you Drinking Socially fans. If you're near a place that is selling any of the beers in the box, like Sam Adams' Love Conquers Ale or Brooklyn Brewery's Stonewall Inn IPA, DC Brow's Vote. There's actually a full list you can find on hopculture.com of the beers that are in the box. You still get to unlock the badge that is happening at Queer Beer Fest, the Queer Beer Badge. I actually like the design, that badge designed by Brianna White. She's a queer designer from Boston Beer Co. So you got the inside scoop here. It's finally paid off being a Drinking Socially listener. Now you know how to get a badge.
It took a few years, but secret bonus badge. That's the type of things that I love, though. Like, granted, it's awesome what Hop Culture is doing, putting on this festival. But I live in a state where I can't order beer from halftime. But I think I can get Love Conquers All, so I can kind of earn this badge through breadcrumbs. And if you at home or in your car or in the office are listening to this and you want to read up on some breweries that are queer led or supporting, Hop Culture has a great article they wrote, and we're going to put a link to that article in the show notes so you can get out and support these great brewers.
That's right. And as for Drinking Socially, we're actually working on getting a guest on the podcast to help us celebrate Pride Month right here. That may be even coming with another exclusive badge. So we're still working out the details there. Stay tuned. But really excited to be celebrating the creative, powerful, and vibrant queer voices in the craft beer community. Keep tuned in here and make sure you're following Untappd and Hop Culture and Beer Advocate on Instagram so you can find out other ways to support the LGBTQ members of our craft community, not just in June, but all the time. And now,
well said. Well said.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we're going to jump and continue on with the show. John, what are we? This badge this week. What are we doing? What's it all about?
Yeah, so last week at the end of the show, I joked about going into a high school locker room smelling like cologne. We're not even close to that, but we are talking about a beer that pretty much is like, it has the same sort of regulations as champagne in France, like Cologne and the Kölsch in Germany. And it's not a Kölsch badge that we're featuring. We're talking on this episode about Das Boot, which is kind of funny because I believe translated it actually means the boat, not the boot.
Right.
But
correct.
That comes from my love of a crazy German submarine movie.
That's right.
We'll talk about that later. But so the description on this badge is, it's old and it's hard for me to pronounce. Das sind mindestens 5 Deutschbier, which I believe means somewhere along the lines of you've drank 5 German beers. And then Untappd goes on to let you know that David Hasselhoff would be proud of you. And I think David Hasselhoff would be proud of anyone that just finished a beer. He seems like a pretty good guy, drove a really cool car, did the whole lifeguard thing. In his 80s, he looks better than I ever have. So cheers to you, Hasselhoff.
Right.
And the key point about this badge is that you're drinking a beer that was produced in Germany. And in order to level it up, you just need to drink 5 different German beers, which does make it kind of hard to max out here in the States where we don't see a lot of variety from Germany. But we'll talk a little bit about that after we get to the beer that we're featuring for this episode. Harrison?
That's right. So you've heard of Reichdorf and Gaffel, I'm sure, but maybe you haven't heard of Früh's Kölsch, which I hope I'm saying correctly. But this is another one of the kind of OG, if you will. God, we say it a lot. But one of like the original breweries in Cologne, known again for the Kölsches that the region produces. They're one of the kind of 3 everyone mentions, and I've had the other 2, but never had Früh's before. So we figured today, why not? Coming from the Kölner Hofbräu Früh in Cologne, Germany, it is a Kölsch, comes in at 4.8% ABV, 19 IBUs, carries a 3.31 out of 5 on Untappd. So again, kind of right in the middle of the road there. But it's always so interesting with these beers that have like a, I don't know, like you can get in a gas station in Cologne, but here I got to go to a specialty shop to get it. Like it's all relative, right? Like someone who gets this every day may not be wowed because they have it all the time. But for us, I'm hoping we're like, whoa, this is perfect and crisp and amazing. And so, take that with for what you will. But from the brewery, it says, from the recipe of Peter Josef Früh of the family brewery, this top fermented specialty beer features the best ingredients and is brewed according to the German purity law. A favorite beer of Cologne, which became one of the city's originals. So, again, a lot of history here, which we can talk about in a moment. But John has the appropriate glassware. I don't. You'll see in a minute. But have you had a first sip? What are we thinking? What do we know?
The tall straight lines of, I don't know if this is technically a Kölsch glass, but it scratched the itch for me, and it really allows this beautiful head to just like billow. It's like a giant cloud in here.
Yeah.
So from the taste, I'm not a Kölsch expert. Most of them that I've had have been produced in America, which are like Kölsch bastards, maybe. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but not official Kölsches. Anyways, usually if there's one note I look for in a Kölsch, it's like an apple or an apple peel and maybe a little bit of grass. And on first sip, I'm getting just like really clean, crisp. Like this is a banger. This is a knock it back. And I mean, we're drinking it out of a 16-ounce can. I haven't seen this beer in a can before. Maybe I just haven't been out shopping enough, but this 16 ounce is going to go down pretty quick. It's not a good review of this beer.
Yeah, it's a cool can. It's kind of got like a swirly red and white bands jumping around it.
Makes me think of going to get a haircut.
Right, exactly. Like a goofy barber or whatever who forgot to put the blue up, or maybe this is the Mohawk barber, or just a salon without a barber. I don't understand. There's a lot of history behind the barber pole that I don't know. But I poured a nice big old fluffy. Most of mine is head.
Yep.
But that's okay.
It looks like a side pour.
Really. But really, like, talking, this is great to get the carbonation out of the beer. It's gonna, hit your nose better. It's gonna. I mean, this is an excessive head that I have, but again, there's many reasons to carbonate a beer, and this beer being as light as it is kind of effervescent as it should be. I'm with you, John. I got to look for that apple note. Get the carb out of this can, get it out of the beer, so you can kind of get those flavors flying around the room and in your nose and stuff. So, and yeah, like my first sip, I'm going to dive in for a second one, but it's like super crisp, super clean. I'm getting it's a slight biscuit note. It's nothing crazy. It's not biscuity. It's just that one, like almost like a cracker, which we've talked about before with Pilsners and stuff that came out.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, one of the Czech lagers, but this is not as pronounced. It's like if that was the Vliet from Threes, if that was like a 10 on the cracker, this is like a 3, and that's fine. Like it shouldn't be as kind of crackery.
I love that you just invented a Richter scale for cracker flavor.
For cracker notes in a beer. Anything can happen, folks.
But this is on my second sip when I was looking for that apple. I mean, it doesn't taste like a cider at all, but where sometimes in a lager you might get corn, or sometimes in like a golden ale you might get a little bit more in here. Those like subtle undertones I get now, like that kind of juicy sour apple flavor, and it's just subtle and it passes quickly. But that's my favorite. I love that about a Kölsch. It's identifiably apple. Yep.
And maybe kind of, on second sip, the hop presence in here it's probably, I would say, Gaffel and Reichdorf Kölsch. I don't remember what their IBUs are, but from memory serves, like it was a definite kind of hoppy, bitter pop at the end. Very quick, but like that was finished so dry, and that complemented that apple note so well. This one's a much smoother finish, where that bitter bite, it isn't quite as intense, but I'm getting subtle kind of fruit flavors and notes right now in it, like kind of the back of my tongue. So same city, same style of beer, but again, different recipes, a little bit different. This one, again, on kind of first couple sips, finishing smoother than other ones I've had, which is cool. I mean, it's like, I mean, pick your metaphor. For me, it's cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. You have a cheesesteak in Philadelphia. You have 100 people that make them, and they're all kind of different somehow. Even though they're all bread and cheese and meat, somehow each one tastes different than the other. That's one example, but I imagine it's pretty similar. You go to a bunch of breweries, traditional German breweries in Cologne, and drink their Kölsches and have a different experience each time, even though this beer is pretty straightforward. However, I should note that what's really cool about the history of this beer is that it's not as it's a little more open-ended than maybe you may realize. So Kölsches, they're protected by the Kölsch Convention, which kind of restricts 20 or so breweries in and around Cologne to being ones that can actually brew this beer and call it a Kölsch. And then else it's a Kölsch style, or they kind of just like champagne, as John mentioned, but it simply defines it, and we joking about, John, how simple this is, but A Kölsch just has to be a light, highly attenuated, hop accentuated, clear, top fermenting bowl beer or regular beer. So not super low in ABV, not super high, which is, again, kind of open-ended, like light, check, highly attenuated, absolutely. There's not much residual sugar in here at all. It's got a hop presence. But what that means, hop accentuated, and maybe that's where the variety comes from. Like, that could mean so much to the brewer. Like, does that mean it really pops with hops, or it doesn't? And it kind of just, the hops aren't as bitter. Maybe they're towards the end of the boil, and you just kind of add a hidden little floral note in there. So again, there are kind of rules around it, but there's plenty of room for interpretation here. And that's now another trip we need to do, John. Go to Cologne and drink 20 Kölsches, and we might be able to do that and not feel too horrible over a course of a couple days.
Yeah, no, I think Kölsch translated roughly means like marathon drinking. Somewhere in, I believe. Don't Google that one, but this is a beer I could drink in mass. I love the flavor. Yeah. The little, like, I'm just going to keep going back to the appliness in a non-pervasive way. It's just like that clean, crisp, refreshing, sour, subtle. But like, I imagine like barbecuing and with this beer being an amazing, or also, I mean, if we're in Germany, we're probably going to a football game and we're drinking this beer. Right. Hopefully they barbecue in Germany. I act like I don't have the internet. Whatever you're eating in Germany, if it's pretzels and mustard, if it's cabbage and sausage, whatever it is, I think it would pair well with this beer. And I also, I give it to Cologne for kind of setting up, like, you can only brew a Kölsch here. If not, it's Kölsch style, of which there are some great American examples, but I like the lore that's steeped in the history of this beer.
Yep. Yeah, and I like this one. This has got a more complex malt build than I would say other ones I've had. It's just a little bit more going on there, a little more cracker biscuit thing happening into that sour apple note. It's cool. And
it's kind of well, here we go, interrupting again. Welcome to the internet, where only one person can talk at a time. I wanted to say it's kind of like it's lager adjacent, the Kölsch. There's a special thing that happens with the Kölsch in yeast and temperature. Am I far off from the truth, Harrison?
Right. No, you're right. I mean, it's technically an ale yeast, but most Kölsch yeasts perform well at lager temperatures, like 59 degrees Fahrenheit, 60, 63, things like that. And traditionally, you do lager Kölsches, so you will age a Kölsch longer than you would pale ale and IPA. And some breweries do it for 2 weeks, some for a month, different temperatures. At that point, you're kind of getting into, what are your secret blend of herbs and spices? You're not going to get an answer probably from Früh or Reisdorf or Gaffel, like how long they lager, what the temperature is, all that stuff. But yeah, it's an ale yeast that performs really well at lager temperatures, and then the beer itself is traditionally lagered before it's released. So, it's kind of, it is by really any definition, kind of this hybrid. It's an ale yeast, but it's a lagered beer, absolutely. That, of course, that's so unique to this style. However, I have heard of certain breweries in the States even experimenting with kind of lagering their IPAs, sitting on it for a bit longer, letting it clear up naturally a bit, making sure that it's going to be shelf stable and taste great longer than a couple of weeks or a couple of days. So that's been cool to see, kind of looking at lagering as kind of like a stress test for any beer. So that's been, and I've had some great IPAs that have been lagered from certain local breweries that I had they had to tell me that it was a beer they kind of sat on longer than I expected they would, like a month, and it was just amazing. So, like, always new things to learn about. Just like Keith Richards said not too long ago, he learns a new thing about the guitar every day. If Keith Richards is still learning about the guitar, brewers can still learn about beer. So here we are, all benefiting from that.
True. I think brewing beer is actually the oldest profession in the world. Or I mean, brewing beer is arguably what caused us to start. What do they call it? Like planting grain and agriculture. It wasn't bread or anything. It was beer. So hell yes, beer. And perhaps in a wicked spin, we start to see lagered IPAs. Maybe that's the next trend we're always looking for. Anyways, before we project down a road we can't turn back from, let's try and rein this in and come back to the badge we're talking about this week, which is Das Boot. And there is just disclaimer, if you're looking for ways to kind of hack the system, there's also a badge called Respect the Kölsch, which you could earn for checking into a Kölsch as well. In this episode, we're featuring Das Boot. What do you have to do? You have to check into a German beer. So this badge has been unlocked 750,000 times on Untappd, or 750,000 different people have drank at least 5 beers made in Germany. Hopefully they're not all German. We'll see how far along Harrison and I are. But the part that I think makes this, where the wrinkle in this badge is, like, all you have to do is drink a beer made in Germany. How hard can that be? The hard part, at least for us here in the States, is finding, 100 different German-made beers. If we look at the beers that have helped people unlock this badge, most popularly, Polliner's Heffy, great beer, had it. Franziskaner, had it. We featured it on the
your Mount
podcast. It was on my Mount Beermore. Love that beer. Third place, Weinstefaner Heffy, great beer. That's been made since before America was a country and 3 versions of Italy ago. Like, that beer's old as heck. You get into like Wursteiner, Bitburger, Beck's, Hofbräu, Spawn's Oktoberfest, which is a great beer, and Eyinger Celebrator, awesome double bock. Part of why I always associate the goat with the double bock. But when you're in America, sometimes those beers we just mentioned, like, that's your German beer selection. You don't have a much more to choose from outside of September and October, when the shelves kind of fill up with some Oktoberfest beers. But even if you're drinking an Oktoberfest beer or a Kölsch style ale, if it's made in North Carolina or Colorado or California, it's not going to help you unlock this badge at all.
Correct.
However, it may help you unlock the Respect the Kölsch badge. Again, clever little workaround there. So, going back to this badge and some of the beers that have unlocked it, and 7,500, 750,000 people that have unlocked this badge at least once. Harrison, let's start the bidding with you. I'm willing to bet you're probably as far along as many of my friends. I regard you as like a big fan of German beer. How far along are you on this badge?
Yeah, and I am and always will be, but I was kind of surprised that I'm only at level 5. So that's 25 different beers, which isn't crazy in either direction. It's not, I mean, I guess it's discernibly low, but I think to your point, I drink kind of the same German beers when I drink it. So the key in here is they got to be different. You can't drink in, a bunch of Früh Kölsches and level up to 100 just by having 500 of this beer. Different beers, so variety comes into play here. But I'm always trying. The last one I had was the first time I had this beer was a fest beer by Benedictiner Brewery last Oktoberfest. It was great, and that's a newer one that I'm seeing. I haven't seen it as much in North Carolina before. They first kind of popped up with the Helles Lager last year. It was really good, and when their fest beer came, I was like, I got to try this, and it was really enjoyable. So, but yeah, I kind of rotate every year, right? Especially Oktoberfest between Hofbräu and Spaten and I mean, anyone else that I can get my hands on them. We've done the cool collabs between Sierra Nevada and a couple different German breweries, which I wonder, that probably wouldn't, because it sits under the Sierra Nevada brewery page, probably wouldn't help you with this badge. But anyway, I've had a few, but I was kind of surprised how low the number overall was. Then kind of doing a inventory check, came to the same conclusion you did of just not a ton of different German beers, but a lot of really great ones I return to often. So with that being said, in our mutual love for Oktoberfest, I imagine you're doing pretty well, although maybe have hit the same or similar bumps that I have. Where are you sitting at this batch right now, John?
Yep. I've drank a good amount. I think I've drank a fair amount of German beers, but I would wager 90% of them have been Franziskaner.
Right.
So and like Franziskaner's Weiss beer, they make other beers, but in America we pretty much only know it by that one brand. Yep. And so I'm at level 2 on Das Boot. The last unlock for me was Einger's Oktoberfest. And the first unlock for me happened in September. It was an Oktoberfest beer. It seems that's when I usually will reach out and drink. I mean, when we did on the podcast 2 years ago, we did 5 Oktoberfest beers, and only 2 of them were made in Germany.
Correct.
So it's not. That's there's some amazing breweries in Germany, like world class. There's some lore and history behind them. And then you have smaller ones like Lieberwaldi and Frau Gruber Brewing, and like smaller microbreweries that are opening up in Germany. But much like when Harrison and I drink a small brewer's craft beer here in North Carolina, and you can't get it 100 miles away, much less across the ocean. Same thing in Germany. I mean, the craft beer is brewing and growing there. Stone Brewing, who's built a huge empire to craft beer. You remember, Harrison, when they set up shop in Berlin, saying it was going to be like, we're going to just bomb out American hops. And Stone, I don't think his experience, everyone experiences failure, but Stone is an amazing brewery and business, and they pushed the envelope with craft beer, and they ended up selling that Berlin operation to BrewDog 2 or 3 years ago, and now BrewDog still brewing hop forward beer, and I would imagine it's got to be really interesting to find this craft brewing beer, this kind of pushing the boundary that's like doing it in a country where the traditions of brewing are so in tune. I mean, there's a quote unquote law about what you're allowed to put into your beer in Germany. So I'd imagine that's going to be hard, or at least like in America, we have a lot of legal problems that prevent people from opening breweries. Not so much anymore, but in Germany, I'd imagine that's a really hard thing to go up against. Like, I want to brew a really cool coffee stout. In Germany, I'd imagine you're up against some opposition trying to do something like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we kind of wanted to, for this week, for the Verified Venue highlight, talk about a craft beer bar in Germany and kind of what is that like. I've been fortunate to talk with many of them over the years at Untappd, and just kind of hearing how exciting it was when Stone bought that brewery. And, before that, they didn't just buy it for fun. They were already shipping tons of beer to Germany, and they were gobbling it up. And they were like, all right, great. There's a market here in a country that's obviously loves beer. They're going for some more hop forward stuff. Let's jump over there and see what can happen. And again, didn't go the way that they wanted for probably tons of reasons, we have no insight into. But yeah, BrewDog's there cranking out hop forward IPAs. So we're going to talk about Craftbeer Corner. It's a verified venue in Cologne. So not just a verified venue that's in Germany, but in Cologne itself, where again the Kölsch is from. Let's talk about kind of the German purity laws, and then within that, there's the law. Again, the Kölsch Convention. There's even more kind of guidelines you have to follow. And then obviously this great history built around very traditional beers. What is it like being a craft beer bar in there? And it was really cool to learn about what Craftbeer Corner is doing. They actually make their own Kölsch. So I looked at their menu to try to find a Kölsch, and there was only one. I assumed either there'd be none. It's kind of some rebellion of like, enough of the old folks beer. We're the new kids. We're doing something different. But they actually kind of split the middle there and said, we're not going to carry anything from traditional breweries. It's a Kölsch, but we're going to make our own. Originally, it was brewed by Früh beer culture, but now Ale Mania makes this beer for Craftbeer Corner, their own kind of house Kölsch. And it's an unfiltered Kölsch. So even that, like they're kind of taking this classic thing and just, again, making it a little bit, it's not hazy. I looked at pictures of it online. It's kind of just got a little bit of what looks like a cold break to it. So not too crazy, but maybe, again, relatively, maybe it's like, lighting the neighborhood on fire. I don't know. But being a craft beer bar in Germany, again, it can be tough. But you probably have like a very thirsty, no pun intended, and excited audience of people who are like, discovering beer, discovering that the beer that their father's father always drank isn't the only beer in the world. Because a lot of it's tied to families, and you drink Hofbräu, or you drink Paulaner, or you drink, Edding, or whatever it is. Opening up the world of beer to a younger generation and having a place to do that. So it's probably pretty exciting and probably really unique. And it'd probably even be difficult for us to go visit and really get the feeling of that, because you probably have to grow up in that culture to really, when you step into a craft beer bar, have that experience of like, all right, I mean, it's not like dancing in the tiny town of Footloose, but maybe it is. I mean, maybe it is like that. Again, I don't know. I'd love to find out more about it. But it was really cool going through Craftbeer Corner's verified their menu. They have more than 280 different beers, but from all over Europe, a few from the U.S., and they actually focus on wild ales as well. Nice. A lot of wild ales, and I was like, I could tell the way the menu was built. There's a specific section just for wild ales they wanted to call out. So that's very, very cool. And obviously great tradition in Europe, all over Belgium and beyond, with the wild kind of spontaneously fermented beers. So really cool to see. And that would be amazing to taste kind of, what does wild German ale yeast do to beer in a country that like predominantly just used lager yeast for hundreds of years? If some of that escaped into the wild and propagated itself, you could harvest that. What would that be like? I mean, that's probably fascinating. So anyway, a lot of cool stuff to unpack there from Craftbeer Corner, but it looks like a cool spot. And what are they doing right now, John? I think you found something about kind of what they're doing currently.
Yeah, I think right now, for science and the benefit of humankind, we should go there and try these wild ales and report back on them. But since Harrison and I think probably aren't even allowed to travel to Germany right now, those of you that are listening from Germany and able to travel to Cologne, there are right now more than 280 beers listed on their Untappd menu. 280 is, I don't think I need to say it, a lot of beers. It's more beers than I've had to help level up Das Boot. But I feel like, as Harrison alluded to, a lot of them, I mean, you can go to Craftbeer Corner in Cologne and you can experience beer from all over the world, which is really cool. And right now they're doing a lot of takeaway beer, like window sales. So you can kind of order ahead, pick them up in a drive-through or walk-through window. They do some beer tastings online, kind of like Untappd's virtual events. I mean, every time I look overseas and look at what's happening in beer in the world, I feel like the rest of the world has embraced technology so much more than we have over here. And Craftbeer Corner seems to be doing a great job of it. 280 beers listed on Untappd. That takes time to update, much less going over and flipping the keg and transferring the pumps and changing the tap handles and all that stuff. Like, updating that on Untappd that could almost be a full-time gig. So bravo to you, Craftbeer Corner, for sharing some amazing beers with the lucky residents of Cologne, Germany, and drinking all your fancy Kölsches. But your unfiltered Kölsch is the most exciting thing to me. I've never had one before. I'm really interested.
Right? Big time.
So we're jealous. We're jealous anytime we can't drink something and talk about it. That's a given. But things that we have drank, Harrison, and kind of talking about, as we get on with our weeks, going back over the last 7 days of your life, what's the best beer of the week for you?
Yeah. So I made a kind of shot from the hip this week in the grocery store, grabbed an old standby I hadn't had in a little bit, and it was absolutely the right decision. So my beer of the week is SweetWater Brewing Company's 420 Pale Ale. So they're classic, not the G13, not any of that other stuff, which is great, but just the 420 Pale Ale. I know I've talked about it before on this podcast. That was kind of the beer I discovered in North Carolina. We moved down here 5 years ago. A lot of great memories about moving to North Carolina on like a 106-degree day in August, but the refreshment that comes from a nice ice cold SweetWater 420, and really like their marketing team got me hook, line, and sinker that SweetWater just did a rebrand on a lot of their core beers, different packaging, slightly different color of green, little things, but it was enough for me to see it again and again and go, all right, that question in the back of my head was like, did they just change the outside, or was this also a chance to tweak that recipe a little bit? And I don't know if I can give anything conclusive there, but it was so great. It was more grapefruity than I kind of remembered. I got a really fresh 12-pack of it, so I'm pretty pumped about that. But it's just it's a flavorful, lighter beer you can put away a couple of. And I was drinking it, and kind of second sip in was like, this is the best beer I've had all week. And I was like, well, I guess I'm talking about it on the podcast. So it's been a while since I've had it. I don't know why, but now it's in my fridge. I've got a few left, and I'm looking forward to, as finally it gets, we had a really mild kind of spring here, finally getting hot out. That beer, some burgers, the grill, like I may be talking about 420 more than anybody wants to hear about it in the near future, but that's okay. Because I'm enjoying it, and yeah, glad to have those memories floating back to a new place when we came down here for the first time, some new beers, and the right time when it's hot out and gross, and I want something ice cold and crispy. 420's got my back. But what about you, John? What did you discover this week, or rediscover, or where are you at? What did you enjoy?
Yeah, it was a little bit different for me, and I love your story. And whenever a brewery kind of rebrands, that's a reminder to me to like go and resample their core beers.
Yeah.
Like New Belgium Fat Tire, no one's running out to go purchase a 6-pack of that. But if you close your eyes and you drink it unknowingly, it's an amazing beer. Like core beers are there for a reason; they're delicious, but for me, the most memorable beer of the week was a little bit different. It was a beer called The World's Turned Upside Down, and it's from Carton Brewing. I wish we could get them here, Carton Brewing, and feature them on the podcast. This was a barley wine, which reminds me of bottle shares, because usually that's the only time I can drink a barley wine is if I share it with people. It was 12%. Grilled pineapple and maraschino cherry barley wine. It was like, it's modeled after my all-time favorite dessert. Every birthday, that's what I ask for, is a pineapple upside down cake. And one of my Untappd friends, Heather, nailed it with her check-in saying, I guess I'm a barley wine girl now. And so am I, Heather. That was delicious. So I think, if your best beer of the week is a barley wine, you're having a great week. Celebrate that. Have another 12% barley wine and call it a day early if you must. Yeah. Much like Harrison and I. We've done it again. We've been talking about beer, and everybody's got to go to work. So if I can dust up my German, Danke fürs Zuschwan, which I think means thank you for watching. You
Ah.
can pretend that, well, if you're watching on YouTube, yes, danke für Zuschauen. And remember, Germany not only makes great automobiles, which they do, but their beer is pretty darn good, amazing, historical, and even their craft scene. I think you have to kind of go to Germany to experience it, but it seems like it's worth it. And if you want to see Harrison's Hawaiian shirt, if you want to see Harrison's face react to the Appley moment in this Kölsch, check us out on YouTube, follow us, subscribe, hit the bell, give us a thumbs up. We love all that stuff, and Harrison's putting his kids through college with those likes.
That's it.
Other than that, what's coming up next Wednesday, Harry?
Polls, and more polls, John. You know what I mean. Interesting response last time. Right. So we're going to give it another try for some future badges. Maybe it'll be paint the town red. Probably not, though, but we'll see. So just keep tuned in on all the social internet things and let us know in the comments if you have a badge you want us to do, a badge challenge, all that stuff. We are looking for our next badge challenge. It right now is probably going to be paint the town red, but open to more ideas. So let us know what should we try to see who can level up next first. But yeah.
As they say in Cologne, Dusseldorf, Berlin, Prost!
Prost! Yeah! A little bit left for me.
Yeah, plenty enough to finish in one sip.